I'm very grateful for the opportunity to address the Citizens' Assembly. I'm also very grateful to you as well for investing your personal time in such an important topic. I work for Coillte, and Coillte manages about 7% of the land in Ireland, so biodiversity really is critical to everything we do. Just looking at Coillte in a little bit more detail, we were established in 1989. The area that we manage is 440,000 hectares. That's about 50% of all the forests in Ireland. We're the largest producer of timber and wood products in the country, the largest provider of outdoor recreation, and we also are responsible for managing some of the largest habitats in the country as well. I think it's important really to start at what's the purpose of Coillte? And look, quite simply put, it's to manage the state forests on behalf of the people of Ireland, to deliver the multiple benefits from our forests to society. And recently we have been looking at the long-term vision of the state's forests, of forests in Ireland, very long-term, not just 10, 20 years, but 80, 90, 100 years, because that's what we foresters need to think about, the very long term. That's the nature of forestry. It is a very, very long-term thing. It's important that we take account of the challenges today, biodiversity and climate. It's also important that we take the opportunities. There's many opportunities, particularly in terms of wood production and supporting our bioeconomy. For us to be able to strike the right balance, though, it's important to know what are the values that flow from our forests. So we looked at the UN Sustainability Goals, and you can see here there's so many values that flow from our forests in terms of climate change, water, habitats, sustainable products, health and well-being, and jobs, supporting rural economies. When we looked at this, we wanted to look at the vision on our own estate. There's a lot of values there. We simplified them down into four main objectives: forests for climate, forests for nature, forests for wood, and forests for people. So we think these four objectives really do sum up what our forests can deliver. And really then it's a matter of balance after that. So looking at biodiversity in a little more detail, it might be useful just to describe the forest estate. It's quite similar. The state forests are quite similar to the private forests in Ireland when it comes to species, composed of about 70% conifer. Where the main differences are, the state forests are more mature, they've been around a lot longer, and they also are on more varied land, and that's really important. So we have a lot of forest blocks large forest blocks up in the mountains, we have small forest blocks in the lowlands, we have a lot of old forest estates as well. So that means we do have a rich amount of biodiversity on our forest estate. Currently we manage about 20% of that estate primarily for biodiversity. That's about 90,000 hectares. So you can see here some of the examples that we have from around the country. These are forest habitats. There are also a lot of open habitats. And in the near term, we're going to increase the area that we manage primarily for biodiversity to 30% by 2025. So we're going to look at areas such as old woodland sites that we have and some of the sensitive areas that we have as well to increase the level of biodiversity. But it's not as simple as just classifying and calling it, well, this is managed for biodiversity. We're actively managing this as well in terms of improving the value of biodiversity. This could be removing invasive species, it could be underplanting with native woodlands, it could be improving the hydrology of sites. So it's very, very important work. Of course, there are many challenges as well. There are challenges to our forests from a biodiversity point of view, and there are challenges from our forests on biodiversity as well. So some of the challenges to our forests would be invasive species and wild deer, and some of the challenges from our forests would be some of the forests that have been planted on, for example, deep peat. So maybe just looking at some of the challenges in more detail. The loss of old woodlands, I think Richard's covered that really well in his presentation. We lost all of our ancient forests really in 1700s and 1800s. At 1900, we didn't have forests in Ireland. It was less than 1%. We're now at 11% forest cover. However, there are some forests in our estate that are showing old woodland characteristics. So our challenge is now, how do we try to restore some of those old forests? We also have forests in sensitive areas, near rivers that are supporting freshwater pearl mussel, for example. We have forests in the uplands, very important habitats that could be supporting hen harrier. So again, our challenge here is how do we redesign some of these areas to improve the habitat, but not impacting negatively on things like, for example, water quality. We also have pressures on our forests, particularly from invasive species such as rhododendron and from wild deer management. Now, again, Rich has covered this very well, but I do want to emphasize the challenge that's presented from an uncontrolled deer population. There's significant overgrazing, and when we are trying to establish native woodlands in particular through planting or particularly through natural regeneration, it's very, very hard because of the grazing, and that's something that needs to be addressed if we want to increase the diversity within our forests. The last big challenge here really is looking at the legacy forests and peatlands. So in the 40s and 50s and 60s, in an effort to rebuild our forests in Ireland, a lot of our forests were planted on deep peat. That was done to try to create a timber resource for the future and to try to create rural employment and jobs. We now know that that wasn't good from a carbon point of view. So a challenge really now isn't what we should have done then. The challenge is what do we do now with some of these peatland forests. So there are challenges, but with these challenges come a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of areas that need to be redesigned and can be redesigned, and through this redesign, we can actually increase the area in the state forests that are managed primarily for biodiversity. So there is fantastic potential going forward. We need to do this gradually. It will take time. We have to work with nature. There are a lot of technical challenges, but we're committed to deliver solutions here. And in the long term, we're confident that we can be managing half of our estate primarily for biodiversity. Now, there are technical challenges, and one thing that we've done very recently is we've set up Cuilta Nature, which is a dedicated team within Cuilta to look at restoration of nature. And they're able to leverage the wider forest organisation, but they're also able to bring in specialist skills to tackle some of these challenges when it comes to restoring our landscapes. So it can be summarised really in 4 areas. The first one is to restore biodiversity. These are large biodiversity projects at scale that can't be done through normal forest operations. You can see in the photograph here, this is Hazelwood Forest in Sligo. This is a very unique forest. It's an alluvial forest. Unfortunately, it has become completely choked with rhododendron. So recently we have invested €500,000 in removing the rhododendron, and it's great to see today some of the Scots pine and oak starting to regenerate in that forest. The second major area is rehabilitating ecosystems. So I've already spoken about the challenge of some of our forests that are in peatlands. So one of the big projects we've underway at the moment is the Wild Western Peatland Project, which looks at restoring over 2,000 hectares of blanket bog. So that's looking at re-wetting those bogs. It's looking at trying to bring back the sphagnum and important bog species to try to rehabilitate that bog. And we've just started work on that this summer, so that's another very exciting project. In the top right-hand corner, you've got regenerating urban forests. One thing that we've noticed through the recent pandemic is that the number of visitors to our forests has tripled. And since the restrictions have eased, the numbers haven't dropped away. I think there's a real sense that people have rediscovered their local woods. So it's really important that we work with local communities and we increase the forests for people to enjoy and to use. The flagship here is very close here. It's the Dublin Mountains conversion, Dublin Mountains Makeover, where we're looking at converting about 900 hectares from commercial forestry into native woodland for nature and for recreation. And finally, in the bottom right, this is linked as well to what Richard was talking about in terms of creating new woodlands. This is using our initiative called Nature Trust that is looking at investing capital and attracting private funding to buy land and to create new native woodlands of scale. So you can see a lot of the initiatives that are underway within Cuilta Nature. And maybe just to wrap up, I might go back to look at the overall vision of our state forest. We said it was a very long-term vision. We think it's a very ambitious vision as well. It's open for public consultation and stakeholder engagement at the moment before we develop more detailed plans. It's also very resource intensive. The work that I'm talking about is costly. It's very important that Cuilta produce revenue streams to reinvest in these areas in terms of nature restoration and recreation. And it's also very important that we leverage public and private investment here as well. So really what it is about forests for climate, nature, wood and people. So from a climate point of view, to summarise, this is about creating 100,000 hectares of new forests by 2050. It's also to improve the carbon sink. It's also about improving the carbon that's stored in our forests by redesigning some of our forests, particularly those peatland forests that I spoke about. So redesigning 30,000 hectares of peatland forests. For nature, as I've said, it's about increasing the area that's primarily managed for nature and also carry out restoration projects of scale. Forests for wood, this is really important that we continue to produce certified, sustainable supply of timber in Ireland and that we use more wood in our built environment that has so many benefits from a carbon point of view. And finally, we want to improve and increase the amount of forests for recreation and for people, double the amount of recreation sites that we have, and continue to invest in outstanding destinations, such as our flagship visitor destination, Beyond the Trees in Avondale. So looking at all of this, I think there are challenges, but there's real opportunities here as well and real potential going forward. I don't think forests have ever been more important. They can provide so many solutions to things like biodiversity loss. Our challenge really is now to strike the right balance in delivering the multiple benefits. Thanks.